In this guide I will teach you how to hunt the Phantom Muspah boss in old school RuneScape. I made this guide specifically for lower level players and Ironmans alike. So if you have anything in this video gear or stat wise that is better than what I show, that is just a bonus. And with that being said, let's not waste any more time and get started right away. Firstly, I will showcase a method with range only, then we do a method with magic plus range, and at the end I'll show you a perfect example of 1kc for this boss. So let's start with the gear and stats. I highly recommend you have 85 in range and magic before you come here. You can get away with 80, but anything below that I don't recommend. The thing with levels in this game is that it's oftentimes much more valuable than the gear you're wearing. For instance, here is a picture I want you to see. On the left we have full ancestral with 90 magic, and on the right we have full Arims with 99 magic. And the right picture has more DPS than the left one, meaning those 9 magic levels are more important than the best magic gear out there. And this exact same thing applies to ranged as well. So despite me giving you the lowest gear possibilities, having levels will always be much more valuable to you in long term. Now I will probably repeat myself multiple times in this video, but I truly went with the lowest possible setup I could think of. So if you have any upgrades to this, please feel free to use them. For my range setup, I went with Black D'Hide. You could upgrade this to full Carols, even God D'Hide set, or if you have the money to spend, full Armadillo. I don't recommend using full Void, not even Elite Void. You need as much range accuracy as possible, as the boss does have high defense, and the Void just doesn't offer that. Even having full Black D'Hide is better DPS than full Void. For my weapon of choice I went with Rune Crossbow because of one reason, and that is Sapphire Bolts, which we will explain later on. If you want the more expensive option, the Dragon Crossbow is currently around 2 million GP, and above that is the Armadillo Crossbow. I do not recommend Blowpipe as the boss has fairly high defense and it just becomes too expensive with that. Other than that, Archer's Arm could be swapped for any Blessed Coif. Robin Hood that is currently 1 million GP, but this will do fine as well. The Glory can be swapped for Amulet of Power or Amulet of Fury depending on what you can afford, and I don't have a ring slot as the best options are either Brimstone Ring or Archer's Ring, and both of them cost 4 million GP. But if you have those, put them on. And lastly, for defensive slot, I wouldn't bring any shield that gives high defense bonuses because this boss is very much, if you're gonna get hit, no shield is gonna save you. So the best defense is offense here, and I'm going with Book of Law because it gives plus 12 range bonus and it cost me only 40k to get this. If you're an Ironman, Black D'Hide shield or any blessed shield is just fine. Odeon Ward and Unholy Book work as well. And lastly, the most expensive item is the Twisted Buckler. For my inventory, I bring a ranging potion, 2 super energy potions. You can swap this out for staminas if you have. In that case, 1 stamina potion is more than enough. Few prayer potions, combo food just in case, teleports with icy basalt, and draws. Now draws are optional, but what I've noticed is that the fights tend to be rather long, and draws on average do like 20 or 30 damage per one troll, and the fight usually is around 4 or 5 minutes, so that is extra 100 damage you can squeeze in with almost zero effort. That being said, trolls require 86 magic and another master level quest, so if you don't have those, it's fine, but Archaeus Spellbook has 3 other spells that could be used on this boss, which we will talk about later on. So having this spellbook while you're ranging is highly recommended. And lastly, I have 3 different versions of enchanted bolts: Ruby, Diamond and Sapphire. It is highly recommended to actually have them enchanted to get the effect work on this boss. With that being said, let's get our first KC and see what the boss is about. Now, I imagine you already fought the boss during the quest, so you have some understanding how this goes. Firstly, when the boss spawns, it is 50-50 chance to be either the melee form or the range form. The difference between the two, the range one is green and the melee one is brown. Let's say the first spawn is melee form. First things first, the boss can very accurately hit you through protection of melee, so it is in your best interest to constantly run around the room to avoid damage. I even made a small paint presentation to showcase how to do that. Since the boss has high range defense in this form, it might take you up to 30 seconds to 1 minute to finish this, or you might just get lucky and get a ruby bolt spec in the first 5 seconds. What I've noticed is that very rarely, but it does happen, where after 1 minute I still haven't finished the first form. I just find it's better to restart rather than waste more resources. But if you feel like no matter what you can get the KC, you should keep going. Once you did 100 damage in the first phase, the boss will swap to other form. Now we have the second form, the range one, and all you have to do here is protect from range and start attacking with your ruby bolts. However, occasionally during the range form, the boss also does a magic attack where an animation starts with the boss shaking around and creating a purple energy ball, and after 2 seconds it blasts the ball towards you. If you completely miss the ball, it would deal up to 60 damage. If you manage to dodge it a little bit too late, you will still take damage, but only half of that. If you do take damage from the ball, you will get corrupted and lose 18 prayer points in 18 seconds. This is where the Arceus spellbook comes in. There is a spell called the Ward of Arceus that removes the effect of corruption on you, so you don't lose any prayer points. I will say this now, it is not needed, but if you do feel like you take too much magic damage, it's good to have it with you. Now after the first 2 phases, there will be a random special attack happening in the arena, and there are a total of 2 of them. One of them is this. The screen goes dark for a few seconds and spikes start to come out from the ground. And this lasts for about 20 seconds. Now here's a tip for you showcased in this clip. You can actually lure the spikes behind other ones so they don't reach you. This is more of a advanced tactic, so if you're not comfortable with this yet, just running around to the other side of the arena once and then back is more than enough. And the second special attack is a demonic cloud where Muspah will turn into a cloud and rapidly will start teleporting around the arena. Now throughout this video you noticed I marked one dial, and that dial is for the special attack. If you stand on that green dial, you will always take 0 damage in this phase, but more often than not, if you also try to attack Muspah on this dial, you will be dragged out of the safe zone. Currently there are a few weapons that can skip this entire phase by standing on the green dial, and those are Twisted Bow and Bofa, and Armadillo and Sarah crossbow on long range, all of them having 10 dial radius for attacking. Other than that, I'm very used to dodging these balls myself, as it is very similar to Akka's white ball phase, so I'm usually trying to DPS as much as possible, as during this phase you can still attack the clouds and you will automatically follow it around the arena. If you feel like you're taking too much damage, standing on the safe spot is the way to go. After this special attack, the boss will always spawn back at the same location no matter what, and that is the northeastern corner of the arena. Now that you completed both special attacks, you repeat step 1 again, where it swaps form every 100 HP you damage. I would swap to Diamond Pulse when the boss reaches around 250 HP or 30% of its HP, but before that keep using Ruby Bolts. Quick note here, I would highly recommend you complete the Kandarin Heart Diary, as your Ruby Bolt spec will go up slightly afterwards. The chance for Ruby Bolts to have special effect is 6%, and after completing the diary, that goes up to 6.6%. It's not very significant, but getting extra Ruby Bolt spec every few attacks could help you in long term. Once the Muspah reaches either 125 HP or 15% of its HP, you need to attack it one more time and the boss will go to its final phase. This is the shield phase, or the prayer phase as players like to call it, and there are 2 options for this. You can take the easy route or the hard one, and I will showcase both. The screen once again goes dark and the boss teleports in the middle of the room. After 5 seconds it will send a shockwave across the arena, and the only way to dodge that is to stay behind the spikes. Taking a hit will deal you up to 80 damage. After the shockwave is done, it will go to prayer phase, and this is where the sapphire bolts come in. If you want to super route, just protect from range and use your sapphire bolts to remove the boss's entire shield. It still has its range form turned on, so occasionally it will attack you with magic as well. You need total of 2 sapphire special attacks to remove the entire shield, and then it's just easy range from until the end of the boss. Now to the more advanced one. Eat to save amount of HP and equip your sapphire bolts before the shockwave ends, and here is where you use the second and the third Arceus spellbook spells. The 2 spells are Mark of Darkness, which will allow you to corrupt your opponent, in this case the boss, and the second spell is Greater Corruption, which will allow you to double the corruption effect on successful hits. After you cast both spells, activate your smite spell. Now it is very important here to wait around 2 seconds after you see the boss's shield bar appear. So in your head, just slowly count to 1, 2, and then click on the boss. Immediately afterwards put protection from range on, and now you flick between protection prayers and smite. When you attack, it's smite, when the boss attacks, it's protection. The smite spell and the sapphire bolts are the only way to damage the boss in this phase. As you can see, the boss also does a magic attack, so what I do is I skip one smite and instead just use protection, and it all syncs up itself. So protection from magic, immediately afterwards getting hit I put protection from range, then smite for my own hit, and then repeat the cycle. The reason I want you to wait 2 seconds at the beginning of the shielded phase is because it syncs up automatically your attacks to the boss's attacks, so both of you don't attack at the same time. You attack first with smite, then the boss attacks you and you take 0 damage because you have the protection on. Occasionally the boss will spawn extra spikes on the ground. This will most likely happen during his attack, so it's important to always pay attention what's underneath you. Some players feel it's easier to just find open ground somewhere next to the boss so you see the spikes more clearly. After the shield is down, it's the normal range form again and just end it off until it reaches 0 HP. Congratulations, you got your KC. Sometimes the boss drops supplies like potions and food so you can stay for longer, and if not, just teleport. Restart your stats and go again. In this clip you can see that even with rune crossbow I can do minimum 2 KC trips. If I had more energy potions I probably could have even done 3. Now, it is time to tackle the magic plus ranged phase. I would say immediately I wouldn't prefer this over the ranged one, but it has its own benefits which I will explain later on. Firstly, for the gear you should go with the same ranged one I showcased before, but now have a 4 to 6 way switch for magic as well. I noticed the boss has a very high defense, so I would recommend using only ancient spellbook for this, no Archaea spines, no normal spellbook in Tangle, either Ice Blitz with 82 magic or Ice Barrage with 94. I'm using the Mystic Ropes, you can even go Salad Ropes, again anything above Mystic if you have like Arims is absolutely fine. I took Trident, and I do realize you can go even lower with Ivan's Blast, but that requires normal spellbook, and I think Ancients and Free spells are just too good to give up. Swamp Trident is also good. For the ring slot I didn't bring anything, but there are very cheap alternatives from quests like Lunar Ring for Ironman, and Seer's Ring is a massive help. If you have Brimstone, which gives stats in range and magic, that's also good. Just pick the option that fits your character the best. In the next clip you will notice I also have a magic cape. I would prefer that over the shield swap. In fact, I found a cheap alternative book-wise, which is the Codex books, and it costs 12k and has a surprisingly decent stats for that low cost. Again, if you're an Ironman, Tome of Water, Tome of Fire, Unholy Book, even Book of the Dead gives you +6 magic bonus. Again, since the boss has fairly high defense, any accuracy you're willing to push out, you should go for. Before we start, I highly recommend you set up your hotkeys. For me, it's F1 inventory, F2 prayers, F3 spellbook in chronological order. It just makes it so much easier, and I can use my mouse to run around the arena rather than wasting that energy on swapping between spellbook and inventory. So we mostly do the exact same thing we did in the range example, but whenever we have melee phase like here, you just freeze the boss and use your trident. As you saw here, if you go for the freeze too early in the spawn, it's not gonna catch, even if you deal damage. You need to wait a few seconds after it spawns, and that's why it's so important to keep distance always. Use the same technique as you would when ranging, and the idea is pretty simple. Freeze with whatever spell you have when on melee phase and slap the boss with trident. When it swaps to range phase, you also swap to range and you go back and forth. Like I said, the only benefit to this is that you don't waste stamina potions, as you do very little running if you catch the freeze. They debuff the boss where you have 10% more likely chance to catch a freeze on this boss. That being said, they also made the boss so that freezes only last for 66% of the time rather than 100%. So for instance, everywhere else, the Ice Barrage has a 20-second freeze time. Here it is a little bit over 14 seconds. So when you do catch a freeze, you can safely hit the boss 4 or 5 times with your magic spell, and then you have to freeze it again. Oftentimes, since it swaps out forms every 100 damage, it will most likely deal that in one cycle, and everything else is exactly the same as in the ranged KC. Again, only please use Ancients. No normal spellbook, no Archaea spellbook here. Yes, you will mess out on trolls, but anything than this seems just factually worse for your experience and for your times. Okay, Let's do a perfect example kills. First of all, this is both magic and range KC. If you're only doing range, just run around the room like I showcased in that portion of the guide. I start off with a beautiful 100 ruby bot spec. This doesn't happen always. Again, this is a perfect example, so be prepared for a longer fight when the RNG isn't in your favor. I know it's gonna swap phases like I said after every 100 HP, so I immediately get some distance between me and the boss for two reasons. Every time the phase swaps, there's gonna be spikes under your character. So I need to keep moving, and secondly I go for the freeze from longer distance, so even if I miss the first time I still have a second chance. I see the experience drop, see I got the freeze, I take my melee prayer off and save some prayer points. In my head I count to 10 seconds because that is a round beautiful number and prepare for another freeze if it doesn't swap phases. Luckily on the last hit it goes to range phase. I use hotkeys to go between my inventory, spellbook, prayers, which by the way you should set up yourself as I mentioned before at the start of the mage plus range portion of this guide, as it makes the kills so much easier. Now the cloud special attack starts. I mostly pay attention to only the small clouds that can damage me, and if I have the time I attack the boss. Again, the green square is a safe spot you can use where you take 0 damage always. After the cloud phase ends, I'm already thinking 5 seconds into the future when it swaps to melee form and I need to be ready to freeze again. So I get a little bit more distance and I do the exact same thing I did during the start of the fight. I count to 10 and get ready for another freeze. But this time I know I will take damage by the end of my count if I stay here, so I'm attacking and moving to the other corner of the room so I can safely freeze again. That way I avoid any damage. And here comes the second special attack, which is the moving spikes. I go to the corner of the room to start running to the other corner as soon as they get close by. As soon as I see the spikes halfway across the room, I trap them behind the other spikes so there is only one following me around. It doesn't keep them stuck there forever, but enough so I have to only deal with the boss for now. I see it swaps forms again, and since I know both special attacks have finished now, I have to only focus on the boss. Here you can see what to do when you splash multiple freezes. Just keep guiding the boss from one corner to another, avoiding the spikes. I splashed 3 times, but because the entire fight I tried to keep reminding myself to keep distance, I managed to take 0 damage here. When I do get the freeze, the first immediate thought for me is to check my run energy and prayer points. I only do this during the freeze because I know I can now focus on this part rather than the boss itself. So I take a dose of super energy potion and I take a dose of prayer potion. I see that we're getting close to 125 HP or 15%, which is when the shield phase starts. So I'm preparing for this by moving closer to the spikes so they protect me from the shockwave. Okay, pause here. As soon as the shield phase starts, I hide behind the spikes. I could have hidden behind the entrance spikes over there, but I was actually afraid I might get stuck there later on in the fight and take unnecessary damage, so I choose these spikes. Once again, let me show you the squares where you are safe. Here is not safe, here is safe. And yes, I can see the shockwave didn't hit on the red cross, but that's because this spike exists. So I guess technically for this specific scenario it would be safe, but my point is that it seems your character needs to be completely 100% behind the spikes to take no damage. Otherwise it doesn't work. So if this spike didn't exist, the red cross is where you would take damage, even though your character is behind the spike. Okay, that got way too complicated. Just stay behind spikes, okay? Here is when the shield phase starts. I equip my Sapphire Pulse Enchanted, I activate my Smite, and in my head I count to 2 seconds before I click on the boss so our attacks are in sync. I click on the boss, the Smite plus the Enchanted effect goes off, I get a huge experience drop. I activate Range Prayer before he even attacks me because I know if it's a mage attack, I have 2 seconds to prepare for that. But reacting to range attack is much more faster. Imagine like chat attack in fight caves, but the range one is 1 second faster than the mage one. In fact, to explain it a little bit better, let's go back to the previous KC as I think the rhythm is much more better showcased here. So I start the shield phase with a smite, I get a hit, I see the boss wind up mage attack and pray against that. As soon as that ends, I go immediately to range attack, and after it attacks me with range, I can now smite my next hit. And watch the rhythm for every time a mage attack happens now. Range spray, mage spray, range spray, back to smite. Range spray, mage spray, range spray, back to smite. You see the rhythm every time he attacks with mage, and all of this is possible because I waited 2 seconds at the start of shield phase to sync up the boss's attack to mine. Okay, let's go back to the perfect example and end this KC. I get a second Sapphire Bolt spec and now the shield phase is pretty much done. And this is just an easy range farm to end the boss off. The only thing you have to look out for is the edges of the spikes, because this is the only place plus an extra spike under you where the new ones arise. So even though at the start of the shield phase you hide directly behind the spikes, now after the phase has ended, you should try to stay away from them. And congratulations, you got the KC you were looking for. And you are awarded a lot of good yummy loot. The only other tip I can give you is don't be afraid to start with mediocre gear and get higher items. If you stay consistent, in a matter of days you will have so much GP that you can get all the upgrades you wish for, and don't be afraid to make mistakes because that's the best way to learn. Because at the end of the day, we're all just humans and making mistakes is the main reason why we come so far. I thank you so much for watching my guide, and if you enjoyed this content, consider subscribing to help me out. But for now, I love you all and I'll see you in a few days with another video. Bye!